Francesco, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, Chuck.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Francisco?
Yes, I am here. Hello, everyone.
Well, you know, the instructions that came on the town's website, it doesn't work. With the email that was sent out, the special meeting with the agenda, it says join the meeting now and nothing was happening.
Well,
Got other people on?
yeah, there are many of us here, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. I'll make sure that Cliff is aware of that so that we don't have that problem in the future. I'm glad you found your way to the meeting, though, Arlene. It's good to hear from you.
Well, I had to call in. I really wanted to look at everybody, but
Okay.
maybe I did it too soon. I don't know. But anyway, I'm here for a
All right.
while anyway, only until 8 o'clock. Then I have another meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for joining us.
I'm sorry for your difficulties signing on also.
Chuck, I see that it's 7 o'clock.
Certainly is. Thank you, Clifton. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Thanks to all our commissioners also for being in attendance here. Tonight we move into a new phase of this study. This phase is going to focus on, we just completed the residential use phase, got a lot of very valuable input for further consideration during the course of that phase, further consideration and evaluation and discussion. And we're moving into the next phase of the study, which will examine commercial, mixed use, and industrial zone districts. There's an agenda that Clifton and Francesco will go over in detail. But we're gonna focus on an overview of all of these districts. We're going to move into other discussions which involve our outreach for this study and have a discussion of how we might improve attendance at these meetings through more effective outreach. And I'm very interested in feedback on that, and we'll share some thoughts we have on new ideas to enhance that outreach. The first item on the agenda is to review a very 40,000 foot review of commercial mixed use and industrial district. The purpose of those. I think this will be helpful. There are many districts on varied purpose, which is often focused on sometimes just one use in that district. This is more informational than anything, and it's very broad and general. But it's a good way to start the discussion, to focus on purpose. We welcome feedback during this phase. What we're attempting to do is to get to the outreach and engagement phase as soon as we can and provide as much opportunity to citizens want to speak during that. So, I encourage feedback and input, but we're going to try to move through item 2 on the agenda as quickly as possible. Francesco, if you could take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for setting it up, Chuck. So Chuck really already walked through the agenda, so I'll get right to things. Sorry. Hold on.
Schedule is the first item.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yes. Yeah,
I skipped over that.
that's all right. That's all right. Just a quick touch point on where we're at in our schedule. Where, as Chuck mentioned, we're now moving into our commercial, industrial, and mixed-use district work. And we'll be occupied with that for the next couple of months. We are just a little behind where we projected to be in our schedule, but I think we're going to quickly catch up this fall, and we'll be occupied with this for much of the fall, and then headed into the holidays, we'll transition. So I think our timing is good, and we're still on track to get all of our work done by June of next year. Okay, so the work before us this evening is to talk about commercial, industrial, mixed-use districts. We spent the past few months reviewing your residential districts and making recommendations for amendments to the zoning regs for those districts. Here we have a very big list of districts, even though those districts only occupy 6.4% of the town's area. So it's actually a very small share compared to your residential districts, but a very important role that these districts play. And you do have, as I mentioned, there they are. There's the list of them, 16 districts. And what we'll do is we'll walk through these one by one. All right. Okay, so here's a map just to give you a sense as to how these districts are distributed. And they are fairly scattershot. There are some clear patterns. Your commercial, industrial, mixed-use districts are concentrated along the highways, near the interchanges, Pawcatuck, Mystic, and in clusters with small little nodes scattered across the town, along the shoreline, along the post road, and along some coastal areas and rivers. But very, very limited areas that we're dealing with here, very small areas. In some cases, these districts are comprised of only a parcel or two. So we're talking about a very small share of the town's area, but very important from a services and economic development perspective. All right. So I'm going to walk through these one by one, and what I'll do is we've got 16 of them, so I don't want to drag this out too much. But this should be a refresher course. Very early in our work, a year and a half ago now, we did a similar exercise, walking through your various zoning districts and their purposes. And I want to make sure everyone understands exactly the purpose and function of each of these districts. And I would also like to open it up to any comments about your thoughts on the efficacy of these zoning districts. Are they doing what they're intended to do? Is the development within those districts in line with what you think the development for that area is? Are the zoning regulations for that district working as intended? Okay. For many of you, you might not have that much familiarity with these districts. Maybe you had recent application or you're reviewed for one of these zoning districts, so you're a little more familiar. So I don't expect you to have full knowledge of all these districts. However, it would be helpful to if you did have thoughts, if you did have a very clear sense as to what the needs are, to communicate that with me this evening. All right. And if there's someone that it does not have their microphone muted, because I'm hearing some noise from time to time, please do mute your microphone while you're not speaking. And then, of course, when you speak, just remember to unmute yourself. Okay.
Clifton, I just want to add one other thing. If you do desire to speak during the course of the meeting this evening, in the upper bar, you'll see a raised hand. Just click on the raised hand. We'll eventually get to you. We'll be able to see that in the right-hand bar. So if you want to speak, raise your hand and you'll be recognized. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Thank you. Yes, please do. Please do. And I will also pause to give anyone a moment to speak up after I go through each one of these. But we do have 16, so I've got to make sure we get through it. So DB5 development area. It's a very interesting name for a district. It's a generic name. I'm not sure where the B comes from. Seems like it should be DA5, but that's been a challenge we've had in some of the namings of these districts. As a reminder, 5 indicates, in this case, 5 indicates the minimum parcel size, minimum lot size, and that would be 5,000 square feet. So we're talking about very tiny lot, right? It's about 1/8 of an acre. The purpose of the zone is a very generic purpose, and we're going to see this over and over. So I think there's probably some work we could do to improve the purpose of these zones, the purpose statement, just to provide a little more guidance for the commission as you're reviewing applications and making decisions. You can better align your decisions with the purpose of each district. So the purpose is for built-up areas with public water and sanitary sewer in order to provide a mixture of commercial, residential, urban density opportunities. So there it is, right there, right? It's areas where you have public services, and it's intended for mixed uses, commercial and residential, right? In a fairly dense setting, hence the small lot size. All right. Does anyone have any questions about this particular district or thoughts as to its efficacy? Okay, I'll keep moving. CS5, another small lot district, 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, hence the 5. This is entitled Convenient Shopping, which is a little more intuitive to the CS. This zone provides small lot restricted business zones in built-up areas. Uses reflect only those needs that service local residences for limited retail and service activities. So I think that's a fairly good description of the intention of the district. It's intended for little nodes of commercial activity that are primarily intended to serve the surrounding neighborhood. So small market and other types of retail and service activities. It talks about built-up areas. There's no mention of public water or sewer here, but it's otherwise very similar to our DB5. With the exception of this zone doesn't make specific reference to mixed-use development within it because it's typically surrounded by residential areas. And I see a hand raised, SR. I'm not sure who that is, but go ahead, please. Unmute
Salvatore
yourself.
Rotacco. And the reason why I raised this, what do you call it, was if you look at what route this is on a state road. There's obviously public water, public sewer, and we have a similar area as Route 27 on Route 2 in Pawcatuck.
Okay.
And it's almost a disservice to the area because, yes, there's residential near it, but you know, it's on a major commercial area. The area in Pawcatuck is literally across from Tractor Supply and La Quinta, and it should really be rezoned.
Okay.
And it might be better to look at it as part of a consolidation effort.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the area in Pawcatuck that should be rezoned? Like what would be a better use of that? What would be a more appropriate district for that land, that area, do you think? What type of uses would you prefer to see enabled there?
So in Pawcatuck, we've got the PV5 zone, and
Yeah.
we actually discussed it at length. Jim Lathrop, who I believe has his hand raised, did a great presentation in front of EDC, and I
Okay.
actually put out there that we should probably have a joint session with EDC so that we can get it into this, because it would obviously take more than 15, 20 minutes. But the long and short of it is, the PV5 zone that we have in downtown Pawcatuck was a great zone. But we weren't able to build up that area in downtown because of what's in the surrounding district, right? If you look at Euclidean zoning, you got to build what's around it to foster what's in that downtown area. And zones like this aren't exactly fostering, the downtown area. I would see that, having something like this with a mixed use with residences would fall more in line with, the state roads that it's on.
Yeah.
So a PB5 zone and a reconciliation, getting rid of the CS5 and possibly some other zones, would be where I would steer this.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Jim, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I'm definitely not going to be as eloquent as Sal, but I do agree with him about the CS5 is almost an anti-development zone when you look at some of the use restrictions and so on and so forth. I think it was put in the late 1970s, if I remember, from my EDC days when we did research on such things.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like the intent of this, and probably rightly so, especially from the era that it was in, is not turn this into like a hamburger highway, in terms of something that looks more like Granite Street in Westerly. And I can understand why the commission at that time would have wanted to kind of check that. I think the world's a little bit different now. I would advocate for CS5 zone elimination and instead souped up or a slightly modified version of LS5 that maybe looks at mixed use opportunities as well. You may not want the same. You may want a greater, a more stringent height restriction, for instance, in PD5 or a few other things that work better along Route 2 as opposed to in the downtown basin area, if you will, lower Pawcatuck. But CS5, if you really look at it, there's not a lot of development going on in any of those.
Right.
There's a lot of empty parcels and undevelopment and uncapitalization. So
and is your concern primarily about the CS5 in Pawcatuck or throughout town, wherever it's located throughout town?
I think most of the CS5 that I've noticed is on the Route 2 corridor. I think there's probably some in other parts of town, but that's I'm a Pawcatuck. My business is in Pawcatuck, so I look at Pawcatuck a lot more than other parts of town. So I would say my concern would be along Route 2, echoing Sal's concerns.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very helpful information. That's exactly why we're here tonight. So I appreciate that feedback. All right. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. Let's keep going. LS5. A lot of similarities with the CS5. Local shopping, this one, LS5. Once again, a small lot zone. And the purpose, this is a small lot business zone for built up areas to provide a range of services to residents in the area. So it remarkably similar to the CS5, and we'll get into some of those similarities and differences. And once we get through these districts, I've got a couple of tables to compare how these are similar. One of the very obvious things with your zoning districts having 16 districts, and this was also central to our discussion in your residential districts, is there seems to be a lot of redundancy or excessive delineation between incredibly similar districts with similar purposes unnecessarily. I don't know as of yet whether or not reducing or consolidating, similar to the approach we took with the residential districts, is an appropriate strategy. But it's something that's potentially on the table. All right, does anyone have thoughts on this particular district? Salvatore, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Salvatore, unmute yourself if you're speaking.
Sorry about that. Again, I'm seeing LS5 also on state roads.
Yep.
Where my office is, it's actually an LS5. And again, I think that, to keep the character of Stonington, that we really need to focus in on, building up more along the state roads and trying to concentrate, build out where we have public utilities to sort of preserve, the rest of town. If this were, I think an LS5 would be more appropriate and, a side street off of a main, road, closer to, where you have residential.
Yep.
But that could also, be tailored as part of, a different zone, that, we could use to consolidate, LS5, DB5, CS5, and, keep with, zones like PV5 where, we could, have variations of it for downtown and possibly along Route 1, Route 2, Route 27. So
Okay.
those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else before we continue? No? Okay. All right, GC 60. So now we're talking about a very different scale of development that is permitted within this district. 60, of course, being 60,000 square feet, or a little less than an acre and a half. And it's a general commercial zone and with a very limited purpose statement. This zone is intended to provide a full range of shopping opportunities for the town. And Pawcatuck Shopping Center is an example of the GC 60. So your typical shopping center type supermarket zone. All right. Does anyone have any thoughts on this particular zone or areas within it? All right. This is very typical of zones we see all over Connecticut. TC 80, tourist commercial. Now this is, I said the prior zone is very typical. This is not as typical. There are not very many communities in Connecticut that have zones that are catered to tourism. And the purpose statement being this zone provides service to tourist visitors to the town with minimal impact on adjoining residential uses. And of course, this is the aquarium and surrounding properties in this district. Anyone have any thoughts as to the effectiveness of this district? Is it serving the purposes intended? Right, it seems pretty much kind of tailored to that part of town and the areas around the aquarium and near the seaport. Okay. Move on. MC 80, marine commercial. So this area, I think it's pretty obvious the function of this. It's along some of your waterways where you do have marinas and other water dependent uses. And the purpose statement is very straightforward. This is a zone where commercial water dependent uses are permitted. Given the nature of the town and the age of the town, of course, these zones abut residential zones. On the drive into many of these places, you're going through a residential neighborhood to get to it. These seem to be effectively serving the needs of the community. Does anyone have any thoughts otherwise? Okay. HI 60, highway interchange, once again, a little less than an acre and a half required for development in this zone. The purpose statement, a little more intentional here, a little more specific. This zone encourages development, high quality commercial, office, retail, hotel, light industrial, age-restricted housing surrounding the interchanges of I-95 with routes 2, 49, 78. Promotes land use which is compatible with the environmental conditions of the area, in particular underlying aquifer and adjacent water bodies. Of course, much of this area is I believe it's in your groundwater protection overlay district. So there are some pretty strict limits on any type of light industrial development would be somewhat restricted in the types of uses and storage of chemicals on site. But otherwise, this zone is intended to allow for a wide range of uses. Any feedback on this? If I recall correctly, I think you just have one area. Elisa or Elisa?
Alyssa.
Alyssa.
Hi, hi.
Sorry.
I think this
Yeah,
is
go
one of
ahead.
our, to me, this is a problem zone in town. It's so
All right, yeah.
underdeveloped.
Okay.
It's been an HI zone for a long time, and there's, like I said, there's just a lot of undeveloped land. It's not working. I
Okay.
think it's not working.
Like undeveloped, like completely, like just vacant land,
Both.
or underdeveloped, like
It's underdeveloped and
Yeah.
undeveloped.
both? Okay. All right, because those are two separate things.
Yes, I should have said both, in both
Yeah,
ways. If
because
you
this,
look
I
at,
think,
there's a lot of, in this particular mall, right, by the old,
Yeah.
by the Stop and Shop, the movie theater, there is something going in there, but that's been a long time coming. There
Okay.
was a development plant, a Target years ago that never happened. One of the problems with this zone is that the highway bridge there, it's not a full interchange is a problem.
Yeah.
People are coming in for
Okay.
that. The bridge is low, so a lot of trucks can't get under it.
Mm,
And
okay.
the land is expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are so I think those are the problems with that zone.
What do you think could encourage or leverage some development here, and what type of development do you think would be appropriate here?
Mixed use. I don't know. I think
Mhm.
we have to look at this zone. This is a very, it's a good location. It's right on the highway. So to
Yeah.
attract things that, from people traveling by, they can see a sign, they can pull
Yeah.
off, of course, my pick, a dispensary would be great in this location. There's, something going into this big mall, but, I know Target
Okay.
pulled out. I think there was going to be a Lowe's maybe pulled out
Yeah.
across the sort of almost directly like across the
Okay.
street here a while back. And this is sort of close to that CS5 zone in Pawcatuck, which is also kind of the problem. That whole Route 2, whole Route 2 stretch. I think one of the problems is you see a lot of for sale signs on the land and they're asking too much money.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
My 2 cents.
You'd mentioned mixed use. The only type of housing that's allowed here currently is age restricted.
Right.
I wonder if like real high density mixed use, like or 4-story residential high density apartment condo with first floor retail or something like that, it would be appropriate.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I should know the history of why it's age restricted. I think the town maybe was trying to attract that. It's, as I was on the Board of Ed for years, and the town is always scared about kids coming in. So it's like, let's put an age restricted because then we don't have an issue with those pesky children coming into town.
I think you just answered your own question.
And it could have been, I was on the commission when this zone went in, so I should remember why, but I don't exactly
Okay, thanks.
remember.
All right, I see a couple other hands raised. Let's go to M. I'm not sure who that is, but M, please say your name and go ahead.
Hi, I think that's me, Maggie.
Oh, hi, Maggie. How are you?
Hi. I just have a question, thinking really long term. And that is whether anybody knows what the conversation is at Amtrak about what they're going to do about the rail and whether or not they're going to move them away from the water and into the I-95 corridor. I know years ago they were talking about that, but I don't know where that ever went.
That, well, that's a project that could be 50 years off to,
Well, by that time,
Yeah.
the rails will be underwater, so hopefully it doesn't
Yeah.
take that long.
I know. So that's a really interesting variable in this equation. You know, what could happen if you had rail that's further north, and what kind of opportunities does that create? But in my understanding of many of these major rail projects, and our firm was on one a dozen years ago, looking at high-speed rail across Connecticut, like a new corridor, and it got shut down. Most of the coastal communities we went to, they didn't want to hear anything of it. So that kind of tells me that any sort of relocation of the rail line is probably decades off. And to your point, that maybe that is advanced by the tracks being underwater. All right, so yeah, we need to keep that. You bring up a good point. We need to think about these long-term opportunities and implications. So thank you.
It might
and I
also
think,
be an opportunity to have a
Yep.
local commuting system that
Yep.
connects communities better and more safely. I'm not thinking high-speed rail, of course, but
yeah,
you
yep.
know, some way to get from Mystic to Pawcatuck safely would be
Mhm.
would also be a good connection, and might go along those, not necessarily I-95, but
Yeah.
maybe some of the other main roads.
Yeah. Okay, and I see a bunch of hands raised. Let me get through them one by one. I think Sal was next.
Francesco, just let me insert one point here, because I think Maggie raises a good point. And that is, and we should reach out to DOT's Planning Bureau and ask them a question on whether there are any realignments. There was a realignment study that you mentioned within the shoreline communities that I believe is shut down, but I'd like to confirm that. Thank you, Maggie.
Okay, I'm making a note of that. And Sal, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to echo what Alyssa said. I went over this with our planner, Jason Vincent, a number of years ago. He actually had looked at RJ's Diesel and their application and all the surrounding businesses that are there. You know, they don't, they like to have retail, but they really don't have much of a retail, presence. It's pretty much some warehousing and so forth when you're going down 49. When you're looking over towards Route 2, where the Breslin property is, the bridge is obviously an issue. It was my understanding that Breslin could only build out 50% unless the bridge is wider. And we obviously need it higher to attract companies like Electric Boat and others that would, be able to use the property there. The other issue with the Breslin property is the topography. There's a real incline going into the space, and in our meetings we had actually referred them over to South County Commons to look at what was put in there, and to possibly have 2 or 3 floors of commercial along the street side, wide sidewalks, with an incline going in. And it wouldn't be, the Hamburger Highway, because now you would have the building facade towards the road. You would go in with a parking lot to the rear, and you would have some more commercial, possibly a floor or 2 more. And then you would have residential above there, and you would concentrate most of the use, to the front of the property, and the back of the property could actually be, left open. It abuts a golf course. We actually had somebody that was real interested in having a convention center, hotel, restaurant, and coffee shop there, which would be perfect for people coming off of 95, they could quickly go over, grab a coffee. If they wanted to grab dinner, and get right back onto the highway. And it'd be a perfect place to have, a convention center for meetings.
Okay.
But unfortunately, unless we do some of the planning, it is, far too expensive for them to go through this process with the cost that they've had to put together that whole parcel there.
Right.
And they're really looking for more, commercial big box where they don't have to focus on all this, residential and all these tenants. But if we make it easier and we make it, where a lot of the planning process has been done, it's something that, we'll most likely see fruition, in our lifetime. So, rather than it just sitting there. And let's see here. With regard to, this whole zone, we've also got to look at not only what's being permitted with regard to the aquifer, but also, all the special uses and applications that have had to go forward, and where do we actually want to focus the residents? So I wouldn't just, put a zone that goes along 49 and Route 2 that's under this highway interchange. I would actually look at, something for Route 2, something for Route 49, and see what would actually work with what's there right now.
Okay. All right, Sal, thank you very much. And Blunt, you've had your hand raised for a little while. Go ahead. Blunt, I know you unmuted yourself, but we're not hearing you. I think you might need to select a different. Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
right, okay. So I've been bouncing back and forth between the use table in the zoning regs, and I think one top level thing would be nice to think about, and this would be an area where it could be done, would be to bring another company into town, like the Plant Genetics or a R&D type company, or a company that builds things, or a lab kind of company that employs people, and as opposed to shopping. Now the use, it's light manufacturing is a special use permit, or office greater than 5,000 square feet is a special permit application. Retail over 5,000 square feet is a special use permit. R&D, so those uses are permitted now, and so, but as a higher level goal, as you with your planning hats on, I think it'd be good for the town to bring another company in, and just like we have Zachary Nuclear, we have Plant Genetics over by the aquarium. We need another company like that in town, I think.
Okay. So we should do everything we can with the zoning regs in this, particularly within this zoning district, to enable that type of business to get established.
I think it's the only place you could put them, and it's close to the highway. They have good visibility. Just north of the Mashantuckets have a facility that it's before it was the Mashantuckets, it was a printing company. I forget the name of it, but it was a internationally recognized printing company, and so it's there may be an opportunity for bringing people into town, employment opportunities for residents and for new residents.
Okay, thank you very much. And Alyssa, I see your hand still raised. I'm not sure if you have an additional comment, or if that just happens to be still raised from your prior question.
No,
Good.
I don't have another comment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think I just put it down.
All right. Okay, Pawcatuck Village, we talked about this a little bit already. This zone is, it's fixed to a geographic area. It provides opportunities for village scale mixed-use development in downtown Pawcatuck area that is sensitive to historic resources, minimizes impervious surfaces, maximizes green space and buffers to the extent feasible. Public access to Pawcatuck River is desired. That's kind of an interesting way to phrase something in a purpose statement, especially as a river walk. Probably a little bit of work we could do to clean that statement up, but I think it does a good job describing what the intention of this district is. Of course, a 5,000 square foot district. It's a small lot district, and with a lot of older historic development, some of it likely preceding your zoning. Thoughts on this? So we talked about earlier, maybe that this district should really be expanded into some of the surrounding, whether it be LS5 or some of those other small lot districts, and we should just expand this out. Anything else that needs to change about the way this district functions? Jim, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so this is where my business is located, and also own property in this area, for full disclosure. But I was on EDC when this was getting developed with Jason, and I don't think this has lived up to its potential nor its intent. There's been very little use of the PV5 zone. There's been a little bit. It's not all small lots. You've probably got, between lots that currently exist and ones that are vacant, could be combined, maybe half a dozen sites of an acre or more.
Okay.
I would advocate to allow for those zones of an acre or more, or lots that could be combined to, for a site plan of an acre or more, to allow residential development similar to an NDD by right at densities of a unit per 1,000 square feet, which you can do in other, which you can do with an NDD and some other mechanisms, but you can't really do it by right. For the smaller, for most of PV5, it's a lot of small lots, odd shaped lots with limited frontage. I would advocate for 3 changes. First, if you're using the density bonus formula within PV5, which is a combination of setbacks and percentage commercial use, that dropping from a unit per 1,000 square feet of lot area to a unit per 800 square feet of lot area, that would be a little bit unprecedented, but not by much, because I think there's a redevelopment of existing provision. I forget exactly. It's in the section 7, I think, of the zoning. It lets you do one every 900. So it's not, way off.
Okay. Yep.
The second thing is the 33% commercial as a percentage of total restriction is very difficult to achieve. And I think this was conceived before COVID and before Amazon really got the head of steam. It's just really hard to get commercial tenants. I can tell you that from personal experience, where this zone cries for more residential density and more residential occupancy.
Okay.
So I would advocate reducing that to 20% or even less than that, or a formula of the frontage of a building squared, as a minimum for commercial. So I don't think that eliminating commercial from these storefronts is very good for that. I think you need to keep that first floor storefront. I would not advocate for an elimination of that, but I would advocate for reduction of commercial usage. And I've been told, again, the discussion with some people in EDC and planning, that this has come up. The high commercial percentages are an obstacle to financing some of these projects. So that's something that should be considered. The last thing I would ask, and I did present some of this at EDC at the last meeting, and ask for them to advocate for this as well, is to take kind of a bold step for PV5 in Pawcatuck Village. And now, mind you, this has to do with parking. Almost all of PV5 falls in with a downtown overlay district. So for commercial zones, for these commercial applications within the zone, you don't have to count parking for existing business sites. I think there are some you have to, with larger sites and so on, but for most of them you don't have to count. Right now, the requirement of PV5 is 1 parking space per residential unit. I would advocate to take the bold step of eliminating that, which has been done in several small to mid-sized metro areas, as I'm sure you're well aware, with some favorable results. Pawcatuck Village is unique a little bit in Stonington, is that you really don't need a car. I mean, you can walk to get groceries, you can walk to do your banking, you can walk to do a number of social things, you can go to gym. It's very walkable, probably more so than Mystic in some cases, only because of the grocery thing. And I watch people walk by my shop and come back with bags of food in their arms all the time, so I know people do it. So I would advocate for those 3 changes. So
All right. Thank you for the very specific recommendations. It's very helpful. Thank you. Sal, you want to build upon what Jim just said? And then I've got a few other hands raised, so we'll make sure everyone gets a word in.
Sure, absolutely. So I just want to echo with regard to the square footage. I actually indicated to Jim at EDC and the rest of the group that the bonus density should actually go down, to 500 square feet, for each resident, what do you call it, for each unit. And I believe that we should differentiate, if we're gonna spread PV5 out, to a PV5A maybe for the downtown, a B, along Liberty Street, West Broad Street, and or part of Route 27. But there should be, certain variations. I think along Liberty Street, we probably want to keep, the PV5 bonus density as is, because we obviously want to focus in on having, additional residential and commercial downtown. I do believe that we need to at least maintain that 20% of commercial, because that is our downtown. We've had
Yep.
meetings with the public on this, and they've indicated, they want a
Right.
fair amount of restaurants, bars, and cafes in our downtown, and we should have that. And I do echo what Jim said with regard to the parking requirement. It should not be on the property owner to actually have these parking requirements. We have, municipal lot areas there. We have off-street parking there. And there's plenty of areas to have, municipal lots or other lots in the future, if we do build up the area, but that's obviously not a concern right now.
Okay.
Our concern should be building up the area and doing whatever we can, which, as I stated before, we also need to build around the area in order to support the downtown and the build out of the PV5 in downtown. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lynn, go ahead. Yeah, Lynn, go ahead and unmute yourself. I see your hand raised. All right, looks like Lynn is working on that. Blunt, you have your hand raised. I'm not sure if it was still raised from before or if you wanted to weigh in.
No, I'm sorry. It's not raised.
Okay, it was just from before. And all right. Lynn, we can't hear you. Just hold that thought while you work on unmuting yourself, and we'll get you in. But I got to keep moving. All right, Heritage Mills. So this kind of unique district, it's really tailored to specific properties and trying to preserve and allow for the reuse of these mill buildings. The purpose of the zone is the purpose statement is this zone provides for a range of uses for existing historic mill buildings and surrounding areas. Its intent is to allow some defined uses of interior space within existing buildings on a simplified basis. That's a really ambiguous statement, kind of a weird statement for a purpose statement. Certain other uses and construction of new building or in addition to an existing building will require a special permit. And that's more of a regulation than a purpose statement. So we've got some work to do on this purpose statement, but the general idea is to allow for the reuse of these old buildings. Minimum lot size, a little less than half an acre. Is this zoning district working for you? You have I think two areas that have been zoned as Heritage Mill. And Alyssa, go ahead. Alyssa, you're muted.
Thought I didn't click hard enough. I don't.
Okay.
No, it's not really working. There have been some good reuses of the mills down there. Thread Mill's a beautiful
Yeah.
apartment building now. I mean, it's gorgeous inside. But a lot of them are still empty. And I mean, even looking at this picture itself, if you look over to the left, it's a huge parking lot with a few cars.
Yeah.
You know, and that's sort of, I live right here. So, I walk this street. As Jim probably sees me walking with my shopping from the grocery store. It needs some work, I think. I understand the
Okay.
idea of preserving old mills, and they're beautiful. There's a lot of issues with preserving old mills. They're brownfield sites. There's contamination. There's this, that, and the other thing. And looking at this impervious area, kind of empty, vacant parking lots, it's ugly and it should be fixed.
So you think we need a little more flexibility in this zone to allow for some infill development?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on this?
I got my hand up. Can I talk?
Go for it.
Okay, it's blunt. This HM zone just covers the the old Cottrell mill and what you basically can see in the picture and a little bit to the left, and it doesn't go any further down the street is my recollection, and that I think more flexibility. What Alyssa was saying, some of the uses that are in the use table, require special use permits and special permit applications. I can remember when a gym wanted to open up in there, it was a startup, a fellow wanted to open a gym with weights and ropes and all that. And he had to have like 3 hearings. It was awful. And that something like that should be by right. We should make these uses easy peasy. And one of the things that it's on your slide here, 20,000 square foot minimum lot size. That was when Jason created this. I was involved in EDC then. The thinking was that if some of those buildings came down, they could be you could build new streets in there, and the lots should be small. And so a half-acre lot for some type of manufacturing use was what Jason was thinking about. The other weakness, of course, is that this is in a flood zone, and so but just piling on to what Alyssa said about making the uses easier would be a huge first step.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Anyone else care to weigh in on this? Okay, let's keep going. M1 manufacturing, traditional manufacturing district. Here, the one just means the first one, the only one, because the lot size is not 1,000 square feet, but 80,000 square feet. It's a little less than 2 acres. Pretty simple purpose statement. This zone provides for a range of manufacturing and commercial uses. Any thoughts on your manufacturing zone? All right, it is what it is, right? Clearly, there are some active uses within the zone. However, Alyssa, it looks like you just raised your hand.
I did. I'm sorry. It's a good zone, but manufacturing, that's kind of, are they really going to come? They're there now. There are some. I'd like to look at the occupancy. Is it really working?
Okay.
I think that's something to look at when you look at these manufacturing zones. I hate getting the idea of getting rid of commercial zones, industrial, manufacturing zones, because once they're gone, and watering them down with, they can put in residential if they want. Let's add that as a use. Then that's what's going to come in. So I'm not in favor of doing that, but in favor of maybe looking at making the lots smaller, lot size smaller. Something. I'd like to investigate this a little bit more. And like I said, I think the important thing is to look at occupancy of the existing buildings to see, has it been, what's in that zone now? Is it being utilized? Is it underutilized? Is it underdeveloped? And do we need to, try to figure out how we can get more, if it's manufacturing or if it's some other industrial commercial use? Like I said, I'm very resistant to turn these things into let's just let them, like I said, let them just throw in some apartments, because that's
right. Then they're gone forever.
It's gone forever. So I don't want to do that, but I think that looking at every single commercial, not every single, it sounds so huge, all these commercial industrial manufacturing uses to see the empty, like how many empty lots there are, you know, are
Yeah.
they being underutilized?
Even with this site that we're looking at, there's a lot of
I'd say look at
underutilized
that.
space there. Yeah,
There's a huge, you know, so why
Yeah.
isn't there a building in the front, or is it because the lot
Yeah.
size is so big? So if you subdivide this lot, could you put in, you know, another building there that can bring in commercial, industrial manufacturing, whatever?
Well, I
okay.
have something to say. It's Fran Hoffman. Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
go ahead. Go ahead.
I think I mean, our way of making things has really changed a lot over the years. And I think if we don't, we need to really take a look at how other cities are growing in that regard and what manufacturing means now, and
Okay.
really hit it intellectually, so that we, with some data behind it, and be flexible in the zoning. I think that's just very practical, is to be flexible on that zoning and to really know what we're facing and talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jen, why don't you go ahead, and then Blunt will go back to you.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Hi, guys. I would just point out that this in particular area that we're looking at, Zachary, is on a very small road leading up. So another big building there could pose significant issues, traffic, safety, whatnot. So I don't necessarily disagree, but I think it's not as easy as just saying,
Right.
look, they have a big front lawn. We would also approve of getting rid of all the geese that hang out in this front lawn. So
Yeah.
or to help,
Okay.
but yeah, but it's a very small, curvy, narrow road that leads up to this facility.
All right, that's a very good point that you make, is what the kind of the location and the infrastructure that's serving some of these zones that needs to be considered as we consider making changes. Thank you. Blunt, going back to you.
This is the M1 is also the zone where Davis Standard is located, and you know they also have a big front lawn, and I think the lot sizes are you know that's an area that could be worked on, as well as the uses. The Davis Standard extrusion drive, I think, is underutilized as you know bus storage and mini warehousing, and you know the mini warehousing could easily turn into something more profitable going forward. But I'm not sure that's a good use for our industrial land in town, especially if we got an opportunity to bring in an R&D type company. And so looking at the use table again, and looking at the lot sizes to increase flexibility, and don't let it go over to residential. Keep don't allow residential use in a manufacturing zone. So keep it so it can be used for business.
Okay, thank you. And Lynn, I don't, have you been able to figure out your microphone? Because I see you've raised your hand twice, it looks like, but we haven't heard from you. Fortunately not. Lynn, you may or not, it's been a little while. You had to call in a couple of times, I think, to be heard. So there is a call-in number on the invite. If you need to call in before this meeting's over so you can be heard, please do so. All right, let's move ahead. LI 130. Here we have roughly a 3-acre district, light industry, which there's a lot of commonalities with manufacturing. This zone permits research and development office parks. So this is really intended for R&D. It allows a less intense use, having less impact on the environment and surrounding neighborhoods. Well, less intense than what? So some improvements needed there, presumably less intense than manufacturing. Thoughts on this zone? All right, it seems to be kind of checking that R&D box. That being said, I mean, I think we're looking at a cooling and heating business, not quite an R&D development. Blunt, anything to weigh in on here?
I just wanted to give you a little bit of history on this. About 15 years ago, there was a push to rezone this residential, and it was kept as light industry. there is a heavy power on that road. There's no water and sewer, but there is heavy power. And so there is infrastructure for business. And, there is some business now down by, certainly actually a lot of business, a lot of startups, small manufacturing companies and spaces for, I would call them like a little mini working man's industrial park down right next to the highway. That's the LI 130, and that that
Okay.
allows. So I would encourage more flexibility so that this properties on this area can be used, since it's right next to a highway interchange, and it's there is power. There is no water and sewer, but there are the components there for business.
Okay. Thank you, Blunt. Anyone else?
Okay.
Lynn, if that's you, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go for it. You've been
Okay, great.
locked out for a little while. Go ahead.
Sorry. Very sorry. So I just wanted to go back one slide and talk about a couple things here. So the M1, the manufacturing, I think Jen spoke to this a little bit, and I think this is something to keep in mind. One is this particular picture, which is representing one of the two M1, is in a very heavily populated area, and it's right on one of the coves. So, this building was probably there in some form previous to even zoning, to be honest with you, because I think there was manufacturing there, way into the 60s, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the reason this little section isn't even considered M1, because it was there and they had to figure out something to call it because it wasn't housing. Okay.
Yeah.
The other is, people are talking about the sprawling lawns, the this, that, and the other thing. We talked about, Davis Standard. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't particularly want to drive down Route 1 and see the, absolutely no green. I think it kind of, do we want total build out of all these areas? And the third thing I want to say, and, Blunt and others have talked about this research and development, let's get some technology in there, et cetera. Well, we were just talking about a zone that was made for that, and it's still not here. So I think we have to be realistic as to the type of industry that Stonington is going to attract. And, we've got a zone for it. Nobody's coming. Nobody's knocking on our door. I don't think it's because it's in that spot versus this M1 manufacturing spot. It's probably because land is expensive, right? And Stonington is a little isolated, and high-tech companies really don't want to be in that kind of an environment. And to Alyssa's point, I believe that the reason that Route 2, et cetera, was originally put forward was it was in a time where, the casinos were booming, where box stores were booming, and we needed a place for it. If it was ever going to come to Stonington, we needed a place for it. And that's one of the reasons it was decided to make that whole area out there into the zone that allows Super Stop and Shop, et cetera.
Right.
We may have missed the boat.
Okay.
I mean, we're not the box stores aren't really expanding anymore. The casino's not really expanding anymore. So I just think it's important to keep that in mind as well when we talk about some of this stuff.
All right, thank you
And
very
then
much.
final is talking about Pawcatuck, the Pawcatuck downtown district. I heard somebody say, well, I think we should have more residential there and decrease the amount of commercial space needed in order for mixed use.
Yeah,
And at
yeah.
the same time say, I don't think we need to have parking for every unit. Well, you might not have a parking issue now when it's 33% or 30% requirement, but you bring that down to 20%, I think you're going to start seeing problems with parking.
Okay.
And I don't think there's a lot of municipal parking in Pawcatuck. I could be wrong, but I'm not remembering any large parking lots in
Right.
that district at all. So it's
Okay.
things to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
I'm
Lynn.
gonna-
I wanted,
Francesco,
Yeah.
just one more point on this.
Yes.
I'm sorry to talk over Blunt. Just one minor point, but I think it's major. You look at some of these areas that are zoned for light commercial and manufacturing, and there are no sewers and water. And it's virtually impossible to develop manufacturing, light manufacturing, or really any commercial use and expect to do it with wells and septic systems. Deep
Right.
regulations are prohibited. So as we move forward in this, we are going to be redoing POCD, which does look at some of the infrastructure.
right,
Maybe we can get out in front of that a little bit and look at the possibility of whether some extensions of these systems using infrastructure money is possible. If we want to make this a viable manufacturing area, there may be a corresponding infrastructure improvement that's required. You're not going to get anybody to come and build a sewer system. An auto plant isn't going to move into this site. They could afford with a plant like that to build a water system and a sewer system
right.
to connect to ours. You're not going to get that kind of development here. So we've got to look at infrastructure as a part of all of this, because if we expect
Okay.
manufacturing or light industrial to come to any of these areas, that infrastructure is simply required.
All right, thank you, Chuck. And I want to make sure we get to everyone who still has their hands raised, but we need to do it in a timely manner because we still have a lot of work to get through and we're well into our meeting. We're just a little past an hour. So with that being said, Blunt, you've been patiently waiting, then we'll go to Jim and Sal.
Okay, thanks. I just want to speak in defense of manufacturing and industry. There are these businesses like Zachary was a spinoff from a nuclear company that was doing nuclear engineering over at EB, and there are opportunities for spinoffs of companies from Pfizer and from EB, and I do think there's a lot of knowledge in this area that you can't get in other places, and so I think given time, it is frustrating to see these properties not get bought up and used, but if they can find some interim use, that's good. But I do think they should be kept open and for future high tech use. And I did want to circle back onto the MC80 and what are what could be a parking opportunity in Mystic, the old Seaport Marine property. There's a lot of area there that could be used for parking, but parking is not allowed as a primary use. You go to the use table and you'll see parking is allowed as accessory use. And,
Right.
I think in the Mystic area, some attention has to be paid to broadening uses and making parking an allowed use in some of the zones in there so that entrepreneur, can make a lot of money with parking. And those, given the opportunity to make it a primary use, I think people would do it.
Okay, thank you. Jim, let's go to you.
Actually, I just wanted to respond to Lynn's comments. I know she was trying to get her mic to work, so it's going to be back towards the PV5. I guess the comment on municipal parking lots, those wouldn't be used, I guess, for residential parking spaces. I would imagine that would be prohibited in any case, as would residential parking on the street. What I was advocating for my comments there was to say, look, some people might not want to have an auto at all, or may want to share it with somebody, or
Okay,
may want to keep their car a decent distance from downtown Pawcatuck. And we'd ask that let the market determine that rather than a zoning
Okay.
regulation, as has been successful in a number of urban and semi-urban settings nationwide.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Sal?
All set. They've actually covered all my points there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. And Jen?
Yeah, I'll just be quick. Just to be clear, Zachary is not manufacturing, so they're actually an engineering company. So they'd probably be better served to be like a L130 or LI 130,
Okay,
whatever that
yep.
was. Just
Yep.
just to note, they're not, trucking in big trucks and whatnot here. It's a
Right.
different kind of business.
That's very good, very important point to make. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I've got it. I just downloaded quite a bit there, so thank you all.
Francisco, you're gonna have to move this along a little quicker.
Yes,
here.
yes,
I
sir.
realize we're getting a lot of comments, but we've got a long agenda. These meetings are 7 to 9 o'clock, so
Yes, it's
we've got
always
a
our
lot to pack
challenge.
in for the rest of us.
It's
Thank you.
always our challenge. Yes.
I
Okay, so that concludes our review of your base zoning districts. However, you do have several floating zones that have been landed. And as a reminder, a floating zone is basically a zoning district where you write the regulation for it. And then an applicant could come in and say, listen, I've got the perfect property that should be zoned this district. And the beauty of a floating zone is the commission is under no obligation, even if their project meets all the requirements of that particular district. You're under no obligation to approve the redistricting if you don't like the project. And that's the beauty of it. The power remains entirely with you to approve it. And then if you do approve it, of course, the district is then changed. Its underlying district, whatever is currently there, is changed to this zone and the standards apply. So these tend to apply to one parcel or a small collection of parcels. The Industrial Heritage Reuse District really has a lot of similarities with your Heritage Mill Zone. I believe there are two separate ones, one in Pawcatuck, the other one on the other side of town, closer to Mystic. Does anyone care to talk about how effective this particular zoning mechanism has been? Right. Well, it's been used twice, so presumably it's being put to a productive use. I'm not familiar with the properties at each of those locations. Here's a view of one of them. So it seems to be an effective mechanism. And anything else on this? Okay, well, let's move forward. Maritime Heritage District. So this was another floating zone. It has a lot of commonalities with the TC 80 zone. It's located adjacent, just south. The purpose is intended to permit the museum, tourism, historical, cultural, educational uses that preserve and enhance town's character while providing opportunities to explore the maritime heritage of the nation. It's a pretty lofty ambition there. This zone is intended to allow for the establishment, continuation, expansion of such uses and activities in ways that will maintain and enhance compatibilities with surrounding neighborhoods. Just one area in town, very specific to this area, to the seaport area. Anything to say about this area? You good? Okay, Alyssa, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. Alyssa, you're still muted.
I never click it hard enough. The only property is the seaport. And so if there's,
Right.
you know, it's such a limited thing, just in terms of making our regulations easier, is there a better way to handle this? That would be up to you. It's a floating zone just for the aquarium, for the seaport.
Right.
to allow
Right,
them to do whatever they need to do interior that doesn't fall into, oh, no, you're in this zone, so you can't put in that other building because it's against FAR or whatever it is. And so whether there's a better
Right.
way to handle that, to just clean up the regulations or something, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not as
it has a lot in common, as I mentioned earlier, with the TC80. There's a lot of similarities there, so we might take a look at both those. They're adjacent to each other. It really doesn't need to be a floating zone anymore. I don't think you're going to take this and apply it anywhere else in town. But maybe there are adjacent parcels that are not currently zoned MHD that they could grab and rezone as a floating zone. You don't, of course, you don't need it to be a floating zone in order to do that. Okay, all right. Thanks for the comment, Alyssa. We'll take that into consideration. NDD, Neighborhood Development District. Now here, this is really kind of leaning towards residential. However, it is mixed use, and so we're covering mixed use districts now. So the NDD is intended to encourage the reclamation of underutilized commercial parcels and permit new construction, renovation, adaptive reuse at these sites, promote diversified housing opportunities, including, but not limited to, mixed-use development uses, and preserve and enhance the town's historic character, sensitive environmental resources, and these neighborhoods in the village cores. And that's a real long sentence. Zone is intended to allow for the establishment, continuation, and expansion of such uses and activities in a way that will maintain and enhance compatibility surrounding neighborhoods. There have been a couple of areas rezoned to this. We're obviously looking at one of them that have been converted to some residential uses. And geez, those are beautiful trees, incredibly close to the front of those houses. Anyone have any thoughts as to the effectiveness of this floating zone? Melissa, again, yeah, we're leaning on you. Yeah, you're carrying the ball a lot tonight. Go for it.
I know, and I know we're really rushed. I know this is my first meeting. Again, like I've said this before, basically just reading that first line, this is taking commercial property and making residential an allowed use where it might not be allowed. And I'm not a big fan of that. If there's another way to do that,
Okay.
I know this is a beautiful development. These houses, they're not beautiful, but they're needed, and they're nicely done. It's not ugly. It's right down the street from my house.
Okay.
But on the other hand, like I said before, I'm not a fan of getting rid of commercial property because once it's gone, this property will never be commercial now.
So that really brings up the question: is this a good idea? Right? That's what we're getting at. Is this a good idea? Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on. We have one more. Yes. Greenway Development District. Another floating zone. The GDD is intended to provide an attractive alternative to the subdivision of land, and by doing so to encourage open space preservation and economic development by allowing a mixture of uses in a comprehensively planned setting that provide the economic motivation for the tool to be successful. All right, it's a little technical there. Therefore, the GDD requires sensitivity in design and development in order to encourage development, which will be complementary to rather than in conflict with abutting land uses. And Jesus seems a lot like the NDD, doesn't it? Seems to have a very similar function or purpose. Any thoughts on this one? And there's a picture of some development actually happening in that area, in that district. Ben, we haven't heard from you yet. Please go ahead. Just unmute yourself, Ben.
Sorry, I thought I did. No, just the short answer on this and the NDD are that they were both designed by specific developers for their properties. So that's why they ended up the way they did, with the help of the town planner, the director of planning.
That's helpful to know. That kind of reads like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, because they're floating zones, that means someone else could come in and try to use these as a mechanism to land them somewhere else in town. assuming, you have another area in town properties that meet all the requirements. All right, so we need to think about that approach. And I see a couple other hands raised. Blunt, let's go to you, and then we'll go to Alyssa again if she has additional comments on this.
Francisco, I just wanted to give you some background.
Yes.
This allows commercial development in residential zones, and this was zoned residential, and it was there was a permit in place to build 30 single-family homes on it. And what you have now is a huge addition to the town's tax base. It's this property abuts 95, and now you've got Hartford Healthcare and probably 300 apartment units in there. And there's a lot of good stuff that happened there.
Okay.
And so this was I think very helpful for the town. It was a good outcome in the end. But to pile on to what Alyssa was saying, what that property that you were in that other slide, that was like extra land around Harris Graphics, and which was a large printing company that had a major office presence in downtown Pawcatuck, and that land was extra land for them to have their parking lot. And when they didn't need their parking lot anymore, it was easy to see it turned into something else.
Okay. Thank you for weighing in on that. Anyone else want to have anything else to say on this? Good. I'm seeing some hands being cleared, so I think we can move ahead. All right. Oh yes, I had almost forgotten the Agricultural Heritage District, and this is the final floating zone. And this is kind of an interesting one. Agricultural heritage districts are intended to preserve Stonington's cultural landscape, ensure continuation of agricultural industry by creating opportunities for locally produced food, protect historic agricultural character and scenic resources, maintain long-term viability and sustainability of farmland by permitting flexible economic use and provide an alternative to the undesirable conversion of agricultural lands to residential subdivisions. Is this working? Has this been used effectively to do what it is intended to do? Ben, I see you have your hand raised again.
I must have just forgot to lower it.
Okay, Fran, you have your hand raised. Yeah, go ahead. Fran, you're muted still. Oh, or she's on hold now. Okay. All right, well, she'll come back to us. While we're waiting for her to get that sorted out. Yeah, Fran, if you can find the unmute button. Lynn, go ahead, jump in. Lynn, we can't hear you.
I think this has been a very effective zone.
Okay.
I think it's hasn't been used widely. It's been used a couple of times. I think there's a limited number of properties in Stonington that meet the criteria for this zone. And I think, so far what we've seen is it's done exactly what it says in its definition. So
Good.
I think this has been a very successful zone.
Good. Thank you for weighing in on that. Fran, go ahead.
This is yeah. My concern about that zone is that it was close to tailor-made for certain projects to move forward, and I think it ought to be looked at again to see how effective it is within the farming community, just to tweak the definition and the criteria.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Sal, I think is that you?
Sorry. Yes, that was me.
Yep.
So we actually have an EDC subcommittee, that's Stonington Agricultural. And I was there when this first started. I've attended a few of the meetings. They should actually be part of the discussion with AHD on how it could be expanded. And I also, since our last meeting, I followed up with our planner and I gave him a couple statutes and referenced the legislative history of how, in the past decade, over 500 farms have closed down in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And the legislative history has looked at, how do we expand the uses of these large properties and make them more economically feasible other than just tax breaks?
Yeah.
And by allowing projects like this and by actually having a zone that falls in line with, properties being used, farming properties being used to actually, bring in commerce and, make them economically viable is a real resource. I know that, there's large parcel owners in North Stonington and in Ledyard that are looking for something similar in those communities. And they've literally been pointing to this floating zone that we have here. And they've referenced it with their planning and zoning and DBAs on certain applications. What I would, my takeaway is, you're either going to have, people, just doing events or having, a temporary housing, okay, to make use of these properties, or you're going to have single family residences, and they're just going to be parceled out. So anything that we could do as a community to look at this zone and revise it to make it more equitable,
Okay.
for big properties and, work within, what the agricultural communities actually, looking to do with their properties, would be a real benefit to us because, helping them preserve these properties, they most likely don't have water and sewer. They're probably not close to, many interchanges. So, their uses are most likely going to end up being single family homes if they're further subdivided. So anything that we
All
could
right.
do to prevent that would be great.
Got it. Thank you, Sal. All right, I need to keep moving ahead to Chuck's point earlier. That's,
I think these next couple of tables will be useful as we move forward and we focus on each one of these areas again. So I think summarily you should just deal with these. We've got to get to the workshop agenda. We've got
Yes.
to get to the, we can't do that at 10 o'clock at night, so.
yes, agreed. So these tables, as Chuck mentioned, are provided for reference. We'll come back to them in our future use. This is really enables you to really compare these districts. How many areas are zoned in each one of these, ranges from 1 to 11, and what kind of acreage do they cover? I'll give you a sense of the scale and the scope of these districts. Likewise, the uses they allow MC80 most restrictive all the way up to the PV5, the least restrictive, meaning they allow the most number of uses, the most uses by zoning permit or site plan versus special use permit. Okay. And so one of the things that we've done is we've reviewed your zoning or your current POCD. And as Chuck mentioned earlier, the town is currently will be initiating development of a new plan of conservation development. But the existing POCD does make multiple recommendations with respect to rezoning of your commercial zones. So we're going to take these things into consideration. It makes references to the LI 130, to Maritime Drive, the TC 80, the Mystic Aquarium, and so some of these items may have been addressed over the past 9-10 years, but we'll carry those recommendations into this work. One of the things we also did is we and this table can be found in the existing zoning regulations. But this is your bulk area height table. And so we want to take a look at this moving forward. Your small lot districts, DB5, CS5, LS5 are definitely your least restrictive, right? They require the smallest lot, most minimum setbacks, relatively high coverage, or floor area ratio. And then you've got other zones that are far more restrictive, such as the LI 130. So that's just for you to digest, and we'll be taking a look at all of these moving forward. Are these the right dimensions? Are these the right standards? Do they allow for the type of density development that is needed to make some of these empty lots viable?
I think we got a lot of helpful comments from a lot of the participants tonight about less restrictive zoning regulations. And it's
Yes.
that table that really frames the restrictions that have got to be examined closely.
Very much so. Yes. Thank you. I want to go through this real quickly. You can take the time you need, take a look at the results we've received so far. As a reminder, we do have an open survey. We've had around 500 people participate. We've heard from each area of town, so the town's fairly well represented. We've heard from participants of various ages. They have informed us that weekday evenings continue to be the best time for them to participate in meetings. So we'll move ahead with conducting these public meetings and workshops on weekday evenings as we have been. So what I did here is, the survey covers a wide range from residential zoning to parking and our commercial and industrial zoning districts. And so we asked several questions to that effect. And, I would say about a third of people participating in the survey really either don't know much about your commercial industrial zoning districts, or really just don't have a lot of interest or knowledge. Like their interest was maybe in residential areas. So when we asked people about the geographic extents of the town's commercial and zoning districts, are they appropriate? About half people said yes. A few other people said no, we need more area, less area, and then a lot of people weren't sure. When we asked about, are there specific commercial and industrial uses that are currently allowed, that currently exist in Stonington that should be prohibited in the future? 80% of people said no. Like whatever we allow now, it's fine. We don't need to prohibit anything. But 20% of people said yes. And I identified a bunch of uses, and there they are listed there, like data centers, gas stations, large apartments. They listed all the things they don't like. We also asked, are there specific commercial or industrial uses that should be more strictly regulated? So not prohibited, but strictly regulated. And a similar response, about 76, 77% of people said no, things are regulated fine, uses are regulated fine. And then of the 23 or so percent that said items need to be more strictly regulated was bars, affordable housing, strip malls, liquor stores, that type of thing. We also asked what type of commercial and development should be encouraged in Stonington. And this was a ranking type question. And it was really even across the board. Mixed use development came out pretty high. Arts and entertainment venues, retail, R&D, but not real big differences. Lowest on the list, hotels and hospitality, office space, corporate headquarters, but we're not seeing real big differences here. And then we asked people to share additional thoughts they had regarding commercial industrial zoning regulations and issues surrounding commercial industrial development. And, we got a wide range of feedback. I'm not going to read it all here. You'll have access to this presentation. We'll make it available to you so you can get into the specifics. And we're going to close the survey this fall and then produce a final summary report of that survey. So you'll have access to that final summary report as well. We also asked, please share any additional thoughts or concerns you have regarding the commercial zoning and industrial zoning regs or issues surrounding development. And so we had a range of other feedback on that. And, most of it surrounded, concerns about this big scale development that people feel is inappropriate, whether it's an Amazon fulfillment center, a Google data center, real big box development, that sort of thing. We also asked specific questions for both Pawcatuck Village and Mystic. We asked, is there a wide enough range of uses permitted in the village in Pawcatuck? And, about half people said yes. A small percentage of people said no, and a lot of people just weren't sure. And with some very strong opinions, this is just a sample of comments, right? We had to some of these questions, we had over 100 responses, and I just pulled a sample. We also asked for Pawcatuck. We basically said the zoning regs currently allow a wide range of residential development types. Should the zoning regs allow for more residential development? And mostly people said yes, yes or yes, but it depends on what type of residential development. Less than 20% said no. All right, so there seems to be good support for more residential development in Pawcatuck. And then we also asked, and this goes back to our conversation earlier about street-facing first floor buildings. Should we reserve those for commercial uses? And people, this is very similar distribution if we go back to this chart to the prior question, right? Strong support, yes, around 20%, less concerned about that. We asked the same questions for Mystic Village. Is there a wide enough range of uses permitted? And we got a very similar response. However, people a little more strongly feel that the range of uses permitted is appropriate in Mystic. We asked about should the regs allow for more residential development in the village? Very similar to Pawcatuck, right? Almost exactly the same results. Yes, yes, depends on type of development, et cetera. And once again, we also asked about, should we protect that first floor, street-facing first floor for commercial uses? And generally speaking, yes is the response, around 20% less concerned. And once again, almost exactly the same feedback for Pawcatuck. So people are really seeing the role of those two villages as very similar. Okay, so that gets us to our next topic. Chuck, I don't know if there's anything you want to say before I jump into this. And you're muted.
Okay,
You're
so-
still muted. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we've had some very good feedback from a lot of sources on face-to-face meetings. Really, most of the meetings, because of budget on this and because we have to conduct so many meetings on this, to get the feedback that we need to properly do this update. Most of the meetings are virtual meetings like the one we're having this evening, and they are useful and helpful. A lot of people are concerned that there isn't more face-to-face meetings. So in this series of meetings that's coming up, we are going to have a face-to-face meeting on commercial, industrial, mixed-use development in the form of a workshop. These have been very well attended in the past. We're trying to get even more people to come the next time. So please spread the word on this date. Feed back to us if there's anything in particular that you'd like us to focus on. But Francesco, why don't you work through the agenda for the workshop as we've conducted them in the past?
Okay, so first I just wanted to confirm with our commission that this date, the 25th, would be our next regular meeting. And because this was kind of short notice to review this schedule with you and conferring with both Clifton and Chuck, it seemed like that would be the most obvious date to go ahead and conduct our workshop since you're all holding that date already. And so I just want to get everyone's agreement that that's strategy makes sense to you, and that gives us 3 weeks to promote it. So I think that it's great timing, and I just want to make sure everyone agrees.
This is Lynn, I agree.
Okay.
It
And
works for
hearing
me.
no, thank you.
It's
And hearing
it's
no,
Elisa.
yes. Okay, so hearing no objection, that's the game plan. We're going to move forward with it. And the Board Ed building, as Clifton informed me, is being used for the middle school because the construction at the middle school, so we won't be at the Board of Ed building. We were able to secure space at the high school. So it'll be in the high school cafeteria. And we'll get the notices out. It'll be posted on the website. We'll get all the promotion out for that. All right, so let's talk about the agenda of that meeting. I'd like to conduct it, and we haven't developed the full presentation for this yet, because I really needed some direction from you this evening to figure out what we should focus on. But I think I'd like to conduct it similar to the past two workshops that we conducted, in that first we'd have a presentation that sets it up, right? We need to educate those attending as to the scope of this project, what this part of the work involves and does not involve, some fundamentals as to what is within our zoning authority to accomplish. And then we used an interactive survey at our past two events. In fact, the prior one, the housing one, we actually used a visual preference survey as part of that. And I think that's been really successful. People have found it very engaging. It's really generated a lot of discussion. So I'd like to continue with that approach, if that makes sense to everyone. And potentially even integrate a visual preference component as well, because that really, people really seem to respond to that. And I think there could be a role for that. And then we'd use the last hour plus of our time for breakout sessions. And so that's the workshop part of it. That's where the real work gets done. And we need to think about how to structure those breakout sessions. We wouldn't just have one long session on one topic. We need to break it up. So I need to give some thought to that. So I'll do that over the course of the next couple of weeks. And what we'll do is we'll circulate that more developed agenda and the presentation to you all at least a week prior to that meeting. That way, if you have any thoughts, you want to weigh in on it, we've got time to adjust it before the workshop. All right, so that's 2 hours, September 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. I know we start these meetings at 7 normally, but we've been running these workshops at 6 o'clock, and it seems to work for everyone, gives them a chance to get home from work or get from work to the workshop. So that's our game plan. All right, any questions or comments on that? Chuck, anything you care to add?
No, I think that,
Okay,
no, I'm fine. I'm fine with
Okay.
it.
yeah,
The
thank you.
interactive survey and breakout sessions have produced a lot of very valuable feedback.
Yes, that is for, so the front half of these workshops, the value in it is for those attending, right? They're learning a lot, and it's us sharing information with them. But that's part of the purpose of these. But more important to myself, our team, and to you as a commission, is that we learn from those attending. And that's really what those breakout sessions and the survey accomplishes. So it's an incredibly important component of it.
I
And
want to
Fran,
make
I
sure,
see, yep,
I want to make
Yes.
sure that we reach out to the local newspapers. There are several pamphlets that are published with information about town, and make better use of the town's website in promoting this workshop.
right, yes. Fran, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Good. Yes, my comment or question or concern, along with just the previous comment, was it's very important as to how the notice is given out, and that that you get a sense of any kind of balanced response. So you want to make sure that you're covering enough bases and opinions or areas of concern, because if you don't really recruit, then you're not going to get the kind of feedback that you have the potential for learning from.
Yes, you're
Agreed.
absolutely
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
it's active rather than passive. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Fran.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on. Outreach and engagement. So we've heard some residents, and to your point, Fran, we've heard some residents have been very concerned that they don't feel that, they've been informed enough, or have not enough people are aware of our work. We've certainly have made tremendous efforts to make this a welcoming, transparent, and open process, but we know we could do better. Chuck, is there anything more you'd like to say about that as we talk about this?
We've had meetings with the economic development staff, Blunt, several stakeholders that have offered very constructive suggestions that we plan on taking advantage of. We've already used some of them. We welcome your input. We know we can do better. We have a limited budget to do this. So commercial advertising and things like that are out of the question. But through some of the suggestions that we've gotten much. I think we're going to get much better participation in the next workshop. I encourage your feedback this evening if you have any suggestions. They're very welcome.
Okay.
Hey, Chuck, have we thought about in the local newspapers, the very local one, like the one that how on a daily basis it lists different meetings happening in the town? It could be the library's having a workshop or whatever. Can we list this workshop and our meetings via the dates in those newspapers?
I don't believe we have in the past. We are now. And that was one of the suggestions that was made. It used to be the major newspapers, the London Day and Hartford Courant, had local reporters. And one way you could get people to come to a meeting was to talk to the local reporter. There'd be something in the town news, and you'd load the town hall or wherever you were having the meeting up. So the media, the printed media is still gets a lot of readership and a lot of attention, and it's a good way to circulate it. So it's a good suggestion. We've had it. Blunt actually made that suggestion, as well as the Economic Development Commission chairman, and we're putting it to good use.
The other question I have is, some of our survey questions, nothing, I don't feel as if any of the questions, they relate to, should we have more, but they don't relate to what should that look like. And when we went through the residential zones, we spent a lot of time on that. And I think that especially when we're talking about commercial in zones that are mixed or right next to residential zones, I think it's important that we understand what the community wants when they say they want more. Do they want more no matter what it looks like? Or they're okay with a store, but they don't want a neon sign and, XYZ. So we have not touched upon that at all. And although today we did hear feedback about expanding zone use, et cetera, I think we have to balance that. And there's nothing in any of our surveys that hits upon that. And I think maybe the workshop should do that.
We did do a visual preference survey, which I think was very effective in the residential.
For residential.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, Lynn. Because of the success of that visual preference, I agree that it's a good way to extract opinions to people on what they expect. In other words, so many people answered yes, more residential, but depending on what it looks like.
Yes.
So the visual preference element was added to residential, and it will be repeated in mixed use, industrial, and commercial as well.
Great. I think that's important. Thanks, Chuck.
A good suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for providing support for that. I was a direction I was interested in going, and it's good to hear a strong support for that. So thank you. Anything else? Yeah, anyone else?
We'll work hard to get the word out, and I hope we have some success. Like I said, we have had very good attendance at the previous workshops, so
Yeah,
I expect the same, and I'm glad we were able to get the high school. Our meetings, moving forward, in the police department, the conference room are gonna be very difficult until we can find a more permanent, and suitable home for these meetings. So I say
Anything
we move
else?
on.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chuck. All right, we still have some open items, and I'll try to. I realize we've got about 13 minutes to go here, so we've spent a lot of time on these issues. But we do still have some open items regarding the residential zoning recommendations, and we continue to receive some feedback on that. So most of the feedback we received to date on our recommended residential zoning amendments have been with respect to rezoning specific areas to reduce nonconformities. So we initially heard we had a lot of opposition from Tipping Rock Road residents on rezoning that area, and we went ahead and changed that recommendation to exclude that Tipping Rock Road area and really sharpen the pencil on the rezoning for that area. We've also since received a petition signed by 85 Lords Point residents requesting that their zoning district not be changed. And we did, as recently as today, receive one letter of support from a Lords Point resident supporting the zoning change because they've had to jump through incredible hoops and apply for hardship variances to make very simple improvements to their home because of the lot size issue and other issues surrounding nonconformity. So that remains an open item. Let me talk a little more about Lords Point because it's really a fairly unique situation that really did not come to my attention until last month. So Lord's Point is actually subject
Can I
of
just,
a.
I'm sorry, Francisco, can I just interrupt just for 1 second? You're totally breaking up, and this is obviously the one reason I'm, please maybe so we get a connection with you.
All right, is that unique to Jen or is that am I breaking up for everyone else too?
No,
No.
you're loud,
Not
you're
for
loud
me.
and clear.
Loud and clear.
Jen is breaking up a little bit.
Yeah,
though.
Jen, you're actually breaking up.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's
you
clear
might try,
here.
Jen, you might try
All right,
turning
then I'll
off
go
your
off camera.
video. Yeah, turning
Yeah,
off
I
your
did.
video might help. Okay, so
All right, okay. Sorry. So
yeah, yeah.
I hate to do this, but could you just step back
Okay, very quick,
to the
very
last
quick,
slide?
right? So we received a signed petition from Lords Point's residents that they would like for their zoning, their neighborhood not to be rezoned from RM20 to RH10. We did receive one letter of support from one resident in support of that. Lords Point is really very unique. So we did a little research on this, and I was not aware of this prior to last month, and it was brought to my attention that Lords Point is an association that's created by a special act of the Connecticut legislature, originally going back to 1925 and amended as recently as I think it was 2013, that essentially treats the association a bit like a borough, not quite the full rights and authority as a borough, but kind of like a borough light. There's one other area in Old Saybrook that was under this act that was also deemed a special area or a special authority. Anyway, within the regulations, and this is the act, the enabling statute, the act. It says that the association may establish building lines and regulate the construction of buildings. So it conveys some zoning authority to these associations, of which Lord Point is one. Now, of course, the mechanisms of that are all a little murky because if this were a borough, it'd be a little more straightforward. There's a lot more legislation on how boroughs are to be operated. They're basically operated like a municipality. So they establish their own zoning commission and they have their own zoning ordinance. And so Stonington Borough, it's, you know, they have applications go to them and they really have an entirely separate set of zoning regulations. But here we have an association that the state has granted some authority to regulate the construction of buildings within. And it's a little bit like a condominium association in that way. However, it's located within a zoning district of the town, and the zoning commission ultimately has the authority to approve zoning permits and other types of permits for the town. So these are really murky waters. So the association has established its own ordinance, Ordinance 1, Section 1 of the association that regulates the type of development permitted. And there it all is right there. And basically it says that no building or building shall be erected within the association which may be occupied by more than a one-family dwelling or used as a hotel, boarding house, orphanage, fresh air home. We're dealing with really old language here, right? It's probably language from the 40s or 50s. Camp, hospital, sanitarium, and on down the line. Without a 2/3 vote of property owners to approve such use. It also, and this would be more recent, of course, short-term rentals are also prohibited, along with boarding houses. So as to exactly how this ordinance interfaces with the town zoning regulations, I'm not quite sure. And we're not going to have time for a lengthy discussion, but this is definitely on our radar. And we want to try to wrap our heads around how this works. If we take a look at what is currently allowed in the RM20, and Lord's Point is currently RM20, what we do see is it allows the following uses that are presumably prohibited by the association. A bed and breakfast facility, I think the association would consider that a hotel, a duplex, hospital, elementary, secondary school, and because it only says only single-family residences, presumably congregate living facility, houses for the elderly would be prohibited, even though those are allowed. These are all allowed in the RM20. A wellness center sounds a little like a hospital or a fresh air home. Presumably, the association would prohibit that type of use, even though it's allowed in the RM20. Now, when we talk about the potential to rezone as an RH10, that doesn't affect any of the uses because the RM20 and RH10 all allow the same uses. So this isn't really a conversation about uses. It's really a conversation about lot size and other lot standards. So the question I have for you, and we don't have to decide it this evening, but it's something we need to think about as we move forward. Do we just walk away from this recommendation to rezone Lord's Point? And do we just leave it completely as is? Or do we try to figure out something that works for the residents and is in alignment with the special authority that the association has? Jen, do you care to weigh in on that at all? And briefly, because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
I got it. Yeah, no, I got it. You're correct that in a conversation with Clifton and Danielle, and myself and our vice president, Clifton stated just what you've gone through, that our ordinance would trump any of the town zoning, which we appreciate, and that was also pointed out as part of the petition that was signed.
So let me just
it is all about lot size. It's all about lot size.
Okay, so let me just weigh in on that. It's not clear to me that the association's ordinance would necessarily trump the town zoning regulations. It sounds like that's the conversation you've had. From
Correct.
The legislation, it's not clear to me that it would work that way, but I understand that's what the general understanding has been.
Well, and our lawyer has also weighed in, believing that would be the case. So we'll further investigate that if need be.
Yeah, if you have a written opinion by your lawyer that you could provide to us, it would just be helpful for reference.
I have not, but we do have some other materials into
Okay.
town, so I can talk to him
All
about
right.
that.
All right, thank you. And you were saying, I'm sorry, you were saying that it's primarily about lot size, correct?
Correct. Yep. Correct. And
Okay.
density issues.
Okay,
I
and
think
so,
just from the perspective on what we can decide tonight, I think some very constructive discussions have taken place with town staff. I think those discussions should mature, and we can reach a resolution with the Lord's Point residents. I think we should move on from this tonight. I don't think we're going to resolve this during this session.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I would just appreciate a time frame for that. This has been going on for, several months now, so.
I concur, and I will pass along.
I bet you do.
No, I will pass that along.
yeah, and as a reminder to everyone, we are not taking action in the near term, right? These are recommended amendments. It's nothing that's going to be brought to a vote. We are allowing for this process to unfold so we have adequate time to get it right and to receive feedback from residents. And to figure out what we need to proceed with. And we don't expect that that we will move forward with and bring forward to adoption 100% of the recommendations we've made. But we want to keep them on the table long enough that we've had a chance to vet them.
I totally agree with that, but with
So
all
this
due
is-
respect, Lynn, let me just please finish. With all due respect, the Montauk area was quickly removed. Tipping Rock apparently has been quickly removed. We had 89 people sign a petition out of 200 homes, and one pro. I don't see why this needs to continue to be dragged out.
I understand what you're saying, and understand your point that if this matter can be resolved, it should be resolved. It shouldn't be kept on the table and held over your head. So I'm going to send a message back to staff that if this can be resolved, it should be resolved quickly.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Chuck,
All
I
right,
just
thank
need
you.
to say this because I think this is very important. There's a difference between Montauk and Tipping Rock because we were decreasing the lot sizes, but it was not a nonconformity issue. All along in the discussions when talking about changing the residential zoning, one of the underlying principles that every discussion was based on was the fact that we want to reduce an existing nonconformity. That was the underlying principle. So I just have to say, if we're going to move forward and eliminate Lord's Point, then I think that the underlying premise for all the other changes is null and void. And certainly the numbers will need to be looked through, et cetera.
Actually, Lynn,
I'm sorry, it's a little late to kind of bring this forward. Montauk
I actually
was
have an
different.
answer to
There was
that.
no non-conforming. Wait,
I have
I'm
an
not
answer to
finished.
that.
We can't have,
Sorry,
ladies.
sorry.
ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
we can't have people talking over each other. So
Right.
we understand the situation at Lord's Point. These comments are confined to Lord's Point, and let's work on the Lord's Point issue moving forward. All the other issues are still on the table, but all still being reviewed as well.
Chuck, can I just jump into Lynn? Lynn makes a very good point. It's Jen again. I asked Clifton for those numbers. In the last 5 years, I believe there were under 6, I think the number was 6 actual requests for variances on non-conforming in Lord's Point. So that's 1 a year.
Yep.
But that's
So
not
it's
the
not
point.
an
The
issue.
point is
Certainly not a
existing
rush to get a
lots.
variance.
Right.
Right, but that's not the point. It's not request for variance. It's existing lots are non-conforming. It's not about
I
requesting
understand.
variances.
I understand that. Believe me.
Okay,
I understand
let's-
exactly what you're saying, and I understand what an existing nonconformity is.
All right.
I also understand the priority for the Lord's Point residents. So let's work on this moving forward and all the other issues as well.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your patience. I realize it's an important issue to you. So thank you for just working with us on this. All right, we're just about there. We received a couple other comments, concerns about changing the flood zone look back period from 1 year to 3 years. We're just going to table that for the time being. We'll come back to it when we can give it the attention that it deserves. And there were some other recent concerns that came to our attention about we had within recommendation 19, which would allow for reduced setbacks and adjusting some of the setback requirements. We'd allowed a kind of a little provision to protect adjacent properties from something being built way closer to the roadway than properties adjacent. And then we had heard concern from someone that, if homes adjacent were set back far in excess of the requirement, then they would be compelled to match what is there, even if it is well in excess of the requirement. And so that's kind of correcting on the other end. So by trying to solve one problem, we may have created another. So that's something we'll take a look at, and we'll see if there's something we could do to correct for that. All right, and that's been really over the past month. That's been the extent of the feedback that we've received on the residential zoning. And I'm sorry, I got to, Mark, if you could just real quick, like 30 seconds, jump in, and I've got to close this out.
Hi, I was just wondering, did I miss the meeting on the increased freeboard in the flood zone?
Yes, we had a couple of meetings on that. That's the top bullet point. We'll come back to that at some point. We're not going to cover it tonight, but the recommendation is to change it from 1 year this is related to the top point. So in addition to increasing the look back period, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about look back. You were talking about increased freeboard. We also recommended increasing the freeboard requirement. That was, we discussed that at a couple of meetings ago. We haven't discussed it in a little while. We are not going to discuss it this evening. We will come back to it. I would recommend if you have something to say about that, if you have thoughts or concerns about that, please put that in writing and get that to Clifton, and he'll provide it to myself and Chuck and the commission, and we'll take that into consideration as we revisit these issues.
Well, one additional word on that from Mark.
Yes.
We've received a lot of negative feedback on that. I have, and that is still very much on the table.
Great, because I couldn't find it in the minutes for the last couple of months. So,
Right.
So as of now, it's still not going forward yet.
All right, so our process has
Correct.
been, Mark, for your benefit, our process has been, we focus on a particular issue for about 3 months over 3 or so consecutive meetings, including a workshop and a public presentation. We did that several months ago. We produced a recommended amendment. So there's a draft recommended amendment that explains in detail the purpose of that amendment and what kind of change would be involved. That's available online. That has been, all those recommended amendments are tabled, enabling us to move forward and address other aspects of the zoning regulations. We will, when we're done working our way through the zoning regs, and now we're working on commercial, industrial, mixed use zones, we will come back to those earlier recommended amendments and decide what to bring forward to a public hearing for consideration of adoption. We aren't there yet. That will occur in 2025, in spring and in early summer of 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so our next steps are to conduct the commercial, industrial, and mixed use districts workshop. And coming out of that workshop, we'll have even more feedback, and it'll put us in a position to start developing recommendations, which we'll use our next meeting to review potential recommendations with you. Our next meeting following our regular schedule will be on October 23rd at 7 p.m. and virtual as usual. And that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Chuck, and I apologize, we went a few minutes over, but I think we accomplished quite a bit.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Good presentation. And thank you all for attending a very, very productive session tonight. Very good comments in all of the zoning districts. And we'll make very good use of your input. So thank you all for attending. Encourage you all to attend the workshop on the 24th, and look forward to our continued closely partnered relationship here. Good evening to all. Meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.